Welcome back, everybody. This is the final episode.
Final countdown.
Yes, of season 7. We've been giving you, or bringing to you rather, horror movies from the 80s this season. And I wanted to start actually by asking you, were there any standouts in the ones that we reviewed for you?
Standouts in terms of ones that I really liked? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the most pleasant surprise for me was maybe The Changeling, because that was one that I'd always kind of heard about. I didn't really know anything about it. And I would say I was pleasantly surprised. A lot of the other 80s films, I kind of mostly got what I expected.
Okay, fair.
But yeah, I would say that's the biggest one. And then Near Dark was one that I hadn't even heard of before. And then, I feel like that one delivered. So those would be the two standouts in a good way. Possession might be the one that blew my mind in other ways. But yeah, how about yourself?
Near Dark for sure. I'm just trying. I've seen everything.
Was there anything new for you?
No.
Whereas most of them were new for me, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah, so that made a difference. I mean, it's been quite a few years since I've seen Videodrome, but I liked it. Quite a few years since I've seen The Changeling, but that stood up for me as well. So it was more, I think for me, not the opposite, but what was true for me was seeing things like Creepshow and going, okay, that had its place and its time in my life, but that doesn't really stand up, right?
Yeah, it's super interesting that for people who grew up in that time period, that nostalgia, I think, plays such a big role in your memory of some films. But then when you go and revisit them, 20, 30, 40 years later, maybe they don't land quite the same way as an adult. But that was not really the case for you in too many examples, correct?
No, not too many.
You kind of seen them a few times throughout.
Yes.
Like, was there any movie that when you went to revisit it really was different than you had remembered it being? Maybe Creepshow, but that there's a big disconnect between what you thought.
Well, I think, along the same lines, it was Creepshow and Gremlins, because it had been a long time since I'd seen Gremlins. But there again, that one I think still stands up as a family kind of fun movie, because kids are kids and they'll still like that. It doesn't hold up as well as, like The Emperor's New Groove in terms of an adult level and a kid level, totally. I don't think.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think those were the ones that like kind of stood out for me. But it was a really interesting, it was interesting for me to get your take on some of those films and to question my own. Oh yeah, okay, I can see that, and not being. I am a modern viewer, but not having seen those for the first time, it was different for me.
It worked out being a really nice dynamic that way, I think, and that you'd seen them all and had prior feelings about them, whereas I was mostly just coming to them new as a more modern horror viewer. And so I think that dynamic was interesting to explore. Do you mind humoring me for a minute?
Sure.
So I found a list of like the common characteristics of 1980s horror films. I thought it might be interesting to discuss, because we were kind of trying to pin down a few times, like, what is it that characterizes like an 80s horror film, because it has a different feel than we were saying, the more dark and dread-ridden horror films of late.
But before you get into that, just a quick shout out to our local brewery, White Sails.
White Sails,
this is their chocolate porter. So there you go.
That's pretty good. So you probably guess a lot of these. So number 1, practical effects and gore, which I think definitely is a hallmark of 80s horror.
Yes.
Number 2, slasher films.
Yep.
Number 3, teen-centered stories.
100%.
So camps, school settings, suburbs.
Parties.
Yep. 4, supernatural and paranormal elements, which I guess is in most horror decades, but maybe that was different relative to prior decades. I don't know.
Yeah, it's an interesting one.
5, Cold War and cultural anxiety themes, which we definitely found. Possession definitely had that.
Yeah.
Camp and comedy. And I think that's the thing that really made this a bit of a tricky season. If you like your just straight horror, really dark, almost all of them have some layer of campiness or humor to them. So that was interesting. Synth-heavy soundtracks, which we commented on a lot this season.
Oh, nothing. There's another word with begins with S that came to my mind.
Shitty synth soundtracks. 8, franchise building. So lots of franchises, mostly built around those slasher icons, the Freddys, the Jasons, the Michael Myers, the Chuckies.
And wasn't...
Hellraisers.
Would you agree with me that... that's an 80s phenomenon.
Totally.
I don't recall having a franchise before that. I mean, you had Universal monster movies, but they were different monsters So I wouldn't call that a franchise, not the same character coming back over and over again.
No, totally. Like Exorcist, there's Exorcist 1, 2, and 3, but even some of those probably didn't even come out until the 80s. So
yeah, the third one for sure.
Yeah.
That might even be later than the 80s. But
we would have had sequels before, but
yeah, sequels, but not the idea of like 10 films or whatever, like a whole franchise.
yeah. Low budgets, high returns, which is probably true.
Yep.
Something like Evil Dead, or I think some of the ones we did too. And then VHS and home video boom. So
I think that explains a lot of the really bad, like straight to video release.
yeah.
Because that's the idea, right? You have a home audience with VHS or beta machines or whatever, and you've got, we've got this, kind of sketchy film. It's not going to get a theatrical release, but we're still going to make money on the home market.
Totally.
Right? So yeah, that totally makes sense to me.
And along those lines, I guess my friend Tony and I were talking, and we think in terms of sheer volume, I wonder if the 1980s has more horror films in it than any other decade, and that probably is largely because of the straight to home video phenomenon.
Think you're right. Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot these days, but 1980s, there's a lot. And I found preparing for this episode and trying to look through the pages and pages and pages of options for 1980s films, like there's the amount of good ones is maybe not as extensive, but there's a lot.
And that made the list a little bit harder because there were some ones that I'm like, oh, that should be on the list, but I'm not sure what I'd take off the list. So
yeah,
there will inevitably be things that should be there that aren't.
So I think the last few seasons we've tried to predict how many overlaps you and I would have. So do you have an official prediction?
My official prediction is 3.
Yeah, I'm going to go 4, but it might be 3. I like that. And I would like to point out that I'm going to have a fairly unorthodox list, I think. So the nature of the 1980s, I was born in 1983. So when we were leaving the 80s, I was 7. I grew up in a fairly religious household, and so I wasn't allowed to watch any of these. So I definitely, even though I've made some headway this season, the 1980s has been a blind spot for me, and I don't have that nostalgic attachment to a lot of 80s films like other people do, and I kind of sad about that because so many people seem very fond of like that decade. So for me, the ones that I do have that attachment to are probably not the ones that most people do. Fair enough. I found some of them I've gone to watch as an adult, but they just don't hit the same way. So anyways, I think I've got a bit of a weird list, but it is what it is.
So would you say, in the late 90s, you would have been in high school. So mid to late 90s. Do you have that nostalgic feeling for 90s horror films? Or I guess you weren't watching them yet then either, right?
Yeah, like I was a bit of a latecomer to the horror, like becoming a real horror fan. Like I don't think I was a real horror fan until I was an adult. Okay. It was high school. It was Halloween, either grade 10 or 11. And we rented the Night of the Living Dead remake. Not the original one, but the Tom Savini directed one. And I just fell in love with that film. I loved it. And that got me really into zombies. And then I was playing like Resident Evil. And
interesting.
Then 28 Days Later came out and all Dawn of the Dead. And so that kind of really got me into horror. And then from zombies, I kind of branched out.
Right.
So I had a bit of a... I know lots of people were captivated by the zombies films of the early 2000s. Yes. I think the horror genre is as big as it is partly because of that.
Yeah, I'd agree.
Because it really captured like the public imagination. But yeah, I wasn't really into horror. Like I would have watched Seven and Silence of the Lambs and some like those really classic ones, but I wouldn't have called myself. I would have seen like I Know What You Did Last Summer and Scream, but they weren't my favorite movies. So yeah. Whereas you've been a horror fan from
long
teenage
time.
years?
Yeah, teenage years for sure. The intensity, it's been ebb and flow, but that's always been a fairly good chunk of what I watch. Yes, horror films. So since I started, would you like to begin with your number 10?
Oh, I get to start? Yeah,
This is our top 10, by the way. I didn't even mention that at the beginning. This is our top 10 of the 1980s. And I think, if I'm correct, this isn't just the ones that we reviewed. It's all the 80s. So
all the 80s.
Many of these might not have shown up on our list this season. So
yeah, no, for sure. And again, these are our personal favorites. We're not saying these are the 10 best 80s horror movies. These are the ones I think that we have sentimental attachment to.
Yes.
Is that correct?
For the most part, although a couple of them I did try to think about, where it fits in the 1980s. And certainly my number 10 is not like a sentimental favorite.
Okay.
It's just, I think it's a good film.
Cool. And much to your chagrin, we've ranked these. So we're going from our least favorite at number 10 to our ultimate 80s.
Although I had less trouble this time.
Oh, good.
I think because I know these films so well that I'm like, yeah, I think I know where I want to put these. So there you go.
Okay.
All right. Number 10.
Jumping in. My number 10 is The Monster Squad from 1987.
Nice.
So synopsis, a group of kids form a monsters club and must confront real classic movie monsters when they threaten their town. This was directed by Fred Decker. No notable cast, I don't think. Has a 6.7 on Internet Movie Database and a 79% critic score. So this one has a lot of significance for me because I think this is the first horror movie that I ever watched. I was in grade 2 or 3. And so this kind of really built my affinity for horror, maybe at an early age. So this film has Count Dracula, Frankenstein's monster, the Wolfman, the Mummy, the Gillman, which is like the creature from the Black Lagoon. So it's got all those horror icons. And it's just this group of kids who have to get together and fight them. It's pretty fun. And it's interesting because it lives in this space between being totally for kids, but maybe being too dark and scary.
Right.
Sorry, being too dark and scary for kids, but maybe too light for adults.
Yeah.
So it is a slightly edgier film, I think, than most kids' movies.
Yeah, I would agree.
So it felt kind of special. And I felt a bit like, oh, I shouldn't tell my parents I'm watching Monster Squad.
I didn't see that till a few years ago. And actually, I found it pretty enjoyable for the most part.
It's pretty fun.
Yeah. Like I didn't cringe at some of the things. It was like, yeah, I could see this. And especially if you saw that at a certain age, I think it would stick with you. I totally get that.
And it really captures, I think, that 80s feel.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure.
So yeah, I got to watch this with my daughter a year or two ago, which was really fun.
Nice.
Because I encountered it around that age. So I don't know if this would make many people's top 10 list of 80s horror. And again, this is why this one is very special to me and my experience with the horror genre. But yeah, my number 10 is The Monster Squad.
There you go.
All right.
Good choice. So my number 10 is Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer, 1986. As the title implies, this is a serial killer slasher true crime. Arriving in Chicago, Henry moves in with ex-con acquaintance Otis and starts schooling him in the ways of being a serial killer. So this was directed by John McNaughton, Michael Rooker, and Tracy Arnold. 7.0 on IMDb, 89 and 71 on Rotten Tomatoes. So this film is loosely based on Henry Lee Lucas. And to me, it's an interesting kind of precursor to the modern true crime craze, like podcasts and documentaries and whatever. It's quite different than most of the ones on my list because this one's pretty gritty and pretty bleak and disturbing, I would say, but a really powerful performance by Michael Rooker.
Does it feel more like a Silence of the Lambs 7 kind of vibe, or?
It's definitely more down that road than any other one. I mean, it's not necessarily a procedural, but it has a little bit of those elements. It's just, I think what's disturbing, at least from my perspective, is how Rooker plays the character as detached from his actions. So it's almost like that, that idea of, and I always get these mixed up, but you're the psychology, psychopath or sociopath?
Oh, yeah, I know. Psychopath.
I think psychopath too. Anyway, yeah, it was very creepy how detached he was, and it almost seemed like low key, but then there'd be flashes of violence, and to me that just seemed real. Not that I know any serial killers, but that dichotomy in their brain seemed very real to me.
Nice.
So yeah, that's my number 10.
Yeah, I've not seen that one. I still, after this season, have a long list of 80s films I still have to check out. All right, good one. All right, my number 9 is actually one that we reviewed this season.
Oh, wow.
And this is Gremlins from 1984.
Nice.
Now, it probably would have been Gremlins 2, but that's 1990, so it doesn't count.
Okay,
but
doesn't count.
Also watched lots of Gremlins. So synopsis, a young man's introduction to a cute pet called a Mogwai unleashes a wave of mischievous, destructive creatures when rules are broken. So we reviewed this one this season, directed by Joe Dante. And this was maybe the only horror movie that I was allowed to watch as a kid. My parents actually let me rent it. So like me and my sisters had a lot of good time watching Gremlins 2, and we'd rent them again and again and again and again. And as we mentioned in our review, it's a blend of, I mean, it's sort of a kids horror.
Yeah, for sure.
We had Evil Emily on who enjoyed it. And I think we liked Gremlins 2 a little bit more because it was just a little more funny. It played up the comedy a little bit more. It goes a little further in exploring territory of what the Gremlins can do and how they morph into different creatures and whatnot. But yeah, it's enough that I think it is horror, but it's certainly made for kids. And since I was actually allowed to watch it, and this is one of the films where for sure I do have that nostalgic attachment to. So again, I'm not sure if Gremlins would make too many people's lists, but for me, I do have that like 80s nostalgia, childhood fondness of that franchise. So Gremlins 1, Gremlins 2, like them both. Maybe we'll get a Gremlins 3 one day.
I think your parents probably saw Amblin Entertainment on the package. Oh, that's a family film. You can watch that.
Totally. I'm going to guess Gremlins is not on your list, but we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. My number 9, however, is Evil Dead, 1981. Horror, body horror, dark comedy. 5 friends travel to a cabin in the woods where they unknowingly release flesh-possessing demons. Say that 5 times quickly. Sam Raimi directed, Bruce Campbell and Ellen Sandweiss. 7.4 IMDb, 86 and 84 on Rotten Tomatoes. So this was Raimi's feature debut. I love the opening. There's a great POV shot opens the film. I think this is a fairly delicate balance of comedy and horror, which I think for the most part they pull off. There's some cheesy practicals. I mean, it's a lower budget film for sure.
Is your shirt?
My shirt.
Okay. Did you do that on purpose?
I did.
Well played.
There's some gruesome body horror and almost, I would go as far as to say, slapstick comedy. So they kind of play both ends. And I think this one's worth watching just for Campbell's performance.
Yeah.
So yeah. And the other thing I wanted to mention.
And we have reviewed Evil Dead.
We did
our original versus remake season. So if you want to go back, we did a review of that and compared it to the 2013.
Yes,
remake.
I think that's season 3 is our
remake.
The other thing I wanted to mention about this is I think it's an important film of the 1980s because it introduced a lot of tropes that we would see come back later. I mean, I don't think it's the first Cabin in the Woods film. Like you've got Friday the 13th and you've got some of those, kids camp kind of things. But this trope of a group of, teenage young adult people going into a sort of secluded place with a cabin, it was one of the first ones that I can really think of that played on that. And there were some other things like the POV that come up in later films. So I think it kind of paved a path for other films.
It's pretty groundbreaking.
Yeah.
I know Quentin Tarantino has talked about like the significance of Evil Dead because he was like, oh, you can make a movie with no money as an independent filmmaker and make it big. And the things that he was doing with that film on a low budget were, I think, inspirational to him.
For sure.
Now that's interesting because when we did our episode where we compared it to the remake, I remember you saying you like the remake better. So 100%. I thought maybe even you weren't even speaking very highly of Evil Dead, but apparently if it's in your top 10 then.
When we're putting those two films side by side, I much prefer the 2013 because I think it's darker, edgier, but as a 1980s top 10, I didn't see how I could not have this on my top 10.
No, that's cool. I just didn't expect you to have it on there. So I didn't know it was a favorite of yours. So that's cool. Evil Dead.
Yeah,
that was your number 9. All right. So my number 8 is Day of the Dead from 1985. So survivors in an underground bunker face escalating tensions and zombie uprisings as scientific experiments blur ethical lines in a decaying world. It's from 1985, directed by George A. Romero. The main stars, they're pretty low. Doesn't matter. Internet Movie Database gives this a 7.4 out of 10, and this has a Rotten Tomatoes score of 86%. Now, Day of the Dead would not be my favorite of the Day of the Dead series, but it is one from the 80s. And as I mentioned earlier this season, zombies really got me into the horror genre. And when I was discovered Night of the Living Dead, I just went crazy and tried to watch every kind of zombie film and Romero film. So I still do appreciate Day of the Dead. I know some people think it's their favorite. The idea of how it I don't want to spoil anything, but what they do with the zombies in this one is interesting. Kind of the hallmark of Romero's zombie series, I guess, is the idea that in many cases the humans are more the villains than the zombies, and the zombies are more the backdrop. So this definitely plays that up. And then you get an interesting what happens in the breakdown of society and what happens to like authoritarianism in the military and if science is doing things that are unethical. I think it explores a lot of social commentary. Some of the gore is really, really crazy. So if you like gore, it has that too. And it's just a bit of a different take on zombies. So if you're a Romero fan and you like zombies, Day of the Dead from 1985.
There you go. Nice
number 8.
All right. Number 8.
You've seen that one, right?
I have seen that one, yeah. My number 8 is The Changeling from 1980.
Oh, major top 10.
Horror mystery haunted house. After experiencing tragic personal losses, a music professor rents a Seattle mansion haunted by a slain boy. Peter Medak is the director. George C. Scott and his wife, Trish Vanderveer. I think there's a significant age gap there. 7.1 IMDb, 85 and 79 on Rotten Tomatoes. So this movie was apparently inspired by allegedly true events in Colorado in the 1960s. Like little tidbits, it's supposed to be set in Seattle, but it's filmed in Victoria and Vancouver, which I thought was cool. This one made my list partly because it's just a solid, creepy, old school haunted house film.
Yeah.
And I won't remember it, so I'm paraphrasing, but I don't know if you remember when we reviewed this one. Roger Ebert said that if technical skill was the only judge of a good horror movie, this would be right up there. But his criticism was not George C. Scott's performance, but just how rational and calm he made the characters, so that you never got the sense, like there was tension, but you never felt that was impacting him.
Yeah, he almost just seemed to fluff off the supernatural elements, and he was just kind of cool as a cucumber. We talked about that quite a bit.
Yeah, so I think for a horror film, that's a detractor, because you want to feel the tension and the pressure that the characters feel.
That's right.
In order to be invested, I think, in the film. But
and I remember we joked that one of our critiques is we didn't buy that she would be attracted to him when they were married.
That was his wife.
And they're actually married in real life. Like, oh, okay.
Yeah,
I guess
that
both wrong in that one. But.
Yeah, because I totally remember saying, "There's no way." Like, there's
Yeah,
so that was pretty funny. Yeah, for sure.
Nice pick. Changeling was good.
Yeah, there you go.
Cool. So we should keep track. So that's 2 that we've done in this season so far that we reviewed, Gremlins and
Changeling.
All right. So my number 7 is one we did not review this season. This is The Reanimator from 1985.
Good one.
So a medical student experiments with a serum that reanimates the dead, leading to hilarious yet horrifying chaos with a morgue and beyond. So this is directed by Stuart Gordon and stars Jeffrey Combs, Bruce Abbott, and Barbara Crampton. This has a 7.3 on Internet Movie Database and a 94% critic score.
94.
So this one is Lovecraftian horror.
Indeed.
I play a lot of board games, and there's a lot of Lovecraftian board games because the license is free, so people don't have to pay, so they can make games that have a cool theme, but they don't have to pay for it. So I'm a big fan of the Lovecraft universe. And this one is just, it's a ride. It is zany. I think if the 1980s is characterized by extreme gore, practical effects, but campiness and comedy, encapsulates all those things. Yeah. This is one that I only watched a couple years ago. And I find most 80s films, they're fun or whatever, but they don't impact me. But I found Reanimator as like a special film.
It's pretty good. Yeah, it's a pretty good one.
Partly because it's just so over the top. The practical effects are super impressive, and it's very unique.
Yeah, agreed.
So if you've not seen The Reanimator, I think it's worth checking out.
Yeah.
You've seen this one, obviously.
I have, yeah.
Do you agree, or what do you think?
Yeah, I would agree. I would agree it's worth seeing. And I think, Barbara Crampton is kind of like the godmother of sort of heroines, horror heroines. It's a fun one for sure. And
the main character is like so serious, but all the things happening around him are so over the top and hilarious. So it has a really fun tone.
Yeah, and there's some really crazy set pieces in there. So I think it's worth watching just for that. For sure.
So Reanimator is my number 7.
There you go. All right, number 7. Near Dark.
Oh, nice. Okay.
1987. That's another one that we reviewed this season. So this is Western horror. A small town farmer's son reluctantly joins a traveling group of vampires after he is bitten by a beautiful drifter. I don't think that really gives anything away because it's pretty much right from the beginning. You know something's up, and it's pretty quick. So this was this Catherine Bigelow's first feature? I don't know.
I think maybe it was.
Yeah, I thought so too. Lance Henriksen, Bill Paxton, Jeanette Goldstein, 6.9 IMDb, 83 and 74 on Rotten Tomatoes. I thought this was a great concept for a film, and Paxton's performance is just
so good.
He's so good.
Yeah, he makes the movie.
We, in our review, we talked about this has some sketchy CG and some plot holes, but I feel like the story and the performances make up for that for the most part.
Definitely.
Unfortunately for this film, it was released the same summer as Lost Boys, and therefore it got lost in the commotion around Lost Boys. But it's Western and it's vampire. Like, what more could you want?
Yeah, because I remember her saying she wanted to do a Western, but they said Westerns aren't making any money, but horrors are making lots of money. So why don't you do a horror Western? So she went
That's
for
what
it.
she did.
Kind of cool.
Yeah. And it's very unique for that reason. Because it's using both the tropes of the Western and the tropes of horror. And if you want more detail, we reviewed that this season, so go back and have a listen. But I think it's still worth seeing. There's some drawbacks for sure, but it's not a perfect film, but it's worth seeing, I think.
Yeah, it's a good pick. I contemplated putting it on my list.
Yeah.
Spoilers, it's not on there, but that's a good one. All right, so my number 6 is Evil Dead 2 from 1987. Have you seen Evil Dead 2?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So you've already talked about Evil Dead 1. Synopsis is the same. Left alone in a remote cabin, Ash must fight demonic forces unleashed by an ancient book, battling both external horrors and his own sanity in a blend of gore and slapstick. Groovy. Directed by Sam Raimi, starring Bruce Campbell, Sarah Berry, and Dan Hicks. Has a 7.6 on Internet Movie Database and an 88% critic score, 89% audience score. Do you have the scores there for the original? I'd be curious to compare.
Yes. The original was 7.4 and 86.84.
Okay. Yeah. So this one's slightly higher.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because Evil Dead 2 is essentially a remake of Evil Dead 1. Like the story is the same. It's doing all the same things as Bruce Campbell. It's a lot of the same things, just turned up to 11, I would say.
Yeah.
The campiness is higher. The zaniness is higher. I think some of the gore is maybe higher. Like it's just a crazier version of the first Evil Dead.
I don't remember the setup. So why are they there in the second one?
Yeah, it's very similar. Like they go out to the cabin in the woods. It uses the same like POV. It's essentially the same film. He just kind of you actually never really see that where someone makes a sequel that's essentially a remake, and they just kind of like, I think because he had more resources or whatever. So
yeah, maybe he had a vision of what he wanted and couldn't afford it in the first one. So he thought, well, I'm going to do it the way I want to do it.
So I know, like Evil Dead fans, there's usually some debate about Evil Dead 1 versus Evil Dead 2. Evil Dead 1's a little more serious, a little darker. Evil Dead 2 leans more into the comedy zaniness. And if you've seen Army of Darkness, it goes like even more into the comedy.
Yeah. And sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So just, I think I prefer the slightly more bonkers Evil Dead 2, but they're both good. It's super crazy, just like Sam Raimi can do. And I think, Tarantino said this was, I think, his favorite 1980s horror film.
I think so, yeah.
He slightly preferred the second to the first, but they're very similar.
No, so Army of Darkness, you're talking about the more recent one.
Army of Darkness was like 1990.
Oh, okay, that's not the one. I'm thinking of the recent Army of Darkness one with Dave Bautista. Isn't that what it's called, Army of Darkness?
No. Are you thinking of the one, The Cabin in the Woods?
No.
Oh, Land of the Dead?
No. I'm 100% sure.
Army of the Dead?
Maybe Army of the Dead.
That's a continuation of the Romero series.
Perfect.
Yeah. Army of Darkness is still Ash. And Bruce Campbell, but he like goes into this like fantasy land. He's fighting like skeletons. And,
yes. Okay. I have seen this.
So I really like that one too. But anyways, Evil Dead 1, Evil Dead 2, both great. I slightly prefer Evil Dead 2, but that's my number 6.
I have something similar on my list.
Okay, interesting.
But not now. So my number 6 is Videodrome, 1983, which we also reviewed this season. Psychological body horror. A programmer at a Toronto TV station that specializes in adult entertainment searches for the producers of a dangerous and bizarre broadcast. So this is David Cronenberg, James Woods, and Deborah Harry. 7.2 on IMDb, 83 and 80 for Rotten Tomatoes. So we talked about this quite a bit. This Cronenberg film really grapples with some pretty big ideas, and we both thought that it was quite ahead of its time. But again, this was originally a box office bomb, but has gained kind of cult status over the years. I think there's some great body horror moments, which you would expect from David Cronenberg. Decent performances by Woods and Harry. But for me, anyway, what's really drawing for this film for me is the ideas that are in the film, the concepts that he's talking about, because some of the things don't hold up as well as you would like. But I think
thematically,
it's great. And again, I mean, Cronenberg, if you're an aspiring horror fan or you are a horror fan and you haven't seen Cronenberg, I encourage you to, maybe start with something in the 80s and then kind of work back to some of his ones in the 70s. And I feel like he's got a pretty decent body of work. So I would recommend checking out some Cronenberg stuff for sure.
Nice. I'm now thinking that, a lot of the ones from our season are in your top 10. Makes sense, though, that you would have picked movies to review for the season that you like. So, that's 3 so far on your list alone, I think, that we did. Yeah, so that's cool. Nice one. All right, so my number 5, I don't think is going to show up on many lists for people. This is a sentimental favorite for me. This is The Burbs from 1989. This has horror elements. It's more of a comedy, but that's okay. A suburban man becomes increasingly convinced that his eccentric neighbors are part of a sinister cult, leading to comedic paranoia and escalating neighborhood tensions. So directed by Joe Dante, who directed Gremlins. Stars Tom Hanks, Carrie Fisher, Bruce Dern, and the legendary Corey Feldman. Wow. This has a 6.8 on Internet Movie Database and a 73% critic score. So when I was in grade 8, I was in like a media club, and we did like movie making and news broadcasting. Cool. I had a really inspirational teacher. Shout out to Mr. Luxembourg. And so at the end of this media club, he had bought each of us a movie.
That's cool.
And he bought me The Burbs, and I'd never heard of it before.
Okay.
And so credit to him that he must have known me pretty well, or my taste pretty well, because I watched this movie.
That's cool.
And I freaking loved it. I still watch it pretty regularly. I'd say I watch this every year or two. You wouldn't really associate these names with horror, like Tom Hanks and Carrie Fisher. It's definitely more lighthearted, more comedy, but it definitely has that horror theme to it, some horror content. So it's just a really quirky, unique, and it really captures that like 80s suburbia. So I grew up in Guelph, Ontario. Yeah. And I remember like you'd go to your friend's house and you'd bike around the neighborhood and get together with your friends. And so this really plays up the idea of like living in the suburbs with your neighbors, but like kind of knowing your neighbors too well and gossiping about other neighbors and trying to figure out what your other neighbors are doing. So The Burbs is just like a really interesting mix. It's pretty unique and it's fun and it's a sentimental favorite. So you've not seen The Burbs?
I have not. We talked about this, I think, in one of our episodes. Yeah, I haven't seen The Burbs, and I guess my misrepresentation or my misunderstanding about what it was, I just assumed it was some quirky sort of dramedy.
Yeah.
But I didn't ever in a million years think it had horror elements. So I am curious to see it. Yeah,
watch it with my daughter. She loves it too. So now she wants to watch The Burbs. So I don't know if many people have seen this movie. It's very light on the horror elements, but I'm comfortable with calling it like a horror comedy. Right. So my number 5 is The Burbs.
And I don't mean to sound like an old man, but I'm going to. I just found it really interesting, you talking about, riding around the neighborhood. Even though we're 17 years difference, like that experience of childhood is exactly the same. Like riding around, like when you had nothing to do, you just got on your bike and tooled around to your friends' houses or whatever. And it makes me a bit sad that that's not what childhood is anymore.
No, I think that's lost, unfortunately. Yeah.
And it's just really interesting to know, because I mean, you could get somebody older than me, hard to believe, I know, but that would have had the same experience in the 70s, right? And I mean, I grew up in the mostly 70s, late 70s, but I think from the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, it was all that sort of thing. Right?
Yeah, like I think the Stranger Things series really captures that well. You've got all the kids and they hop on their bikes and they're exploring the neighborhood. Like I remember there'd be like a development down the street, like abandoned houses, and you go check it out. Like, oh, maybe it's haunted. Is there things in there? Yeah, that was a very special time. It's cool that we have the same experience.
Yeah, for sure. Very interesting. Okay, so
now our kids have TikTok and cell phones. Well, so,
okay,
that's good too.
So we're halfway through the list. My number 5 is also a David Cronenberg film, The Fly from 1986. Nice. Science fiction horror. A brilliant but eccentric scientist begins to transform into a giant man-fly hybrid after one of his experiments goes horribly wrong. So again, David Cronenberg, Jeff Goldblum, and Gina Davis.
Jeff Goldblum.
7.6 on IMDb, 93 and 83 on Rotten Tomatoes. So this for sure is another kind of nasty Cronenberg body horror. It's a remake of a 58 film of the same name. And so aside from the body horror, I think this also has very poignant elements to it. It's quite sad. It's quite heart-wrenching towards the end. And the performances by Goldblum and Davis are really good. It won an Academy Award for Best Makeup.
Oh, cool.
What I wanted to a little tidbit that I found, the other actors, now try to imagine Jeff Goldblum in The Fly, and these were all before Jeff Goldblum got the part.
Okay.
Michael Keaton, Richard Dreyfuss,
wow,
Pierce Brosnan, John Malkovich.
Wow.
And John Lithgow.
Not Nicolas Cage?
Not Nicolas Cage, unfortunately.
That would be great.
I can't see, and it's funny. I mean, we've talked about this a few times, I think, over the seasons. There's an actor or actress who becomes iconic in a role, and you cannot see anyone else in that role. And it was interesting too because
you can't see Pierce Brosnan doing that.
No. Well, part of the reason, I mean, I think Jeff Goldblum, his personality really suits the character, but he's also very athletic. His physique and some of these actors didn't want to do that. Most of those actors didn't want the part because of the makeup and prosthetics.
Right.
So
I remember for Misery as well, the long list of is James Caan. But again, like it was a who's who of Hollywood people who all turned it down.
Yeah.
Now in this case, did they turn it down or they tried out and didn't get it? Or do you know?
In some cases, I think Michael Keaton and Richard Dreyfuss had been offered, if I remember, but they both were not We're not crazy about the prosthetics.
I could see Michael Keaton maybe do a good job in that role.
I don't know. I think he's too smarmy.
Yeah.
I mean, he's an actor. He can do whatever. And I know he's done some serious roles. But I think Jeff Goldblum was just, and again,
Richard Dreyfuss.
I think it's partly because of his performance. And I've seen it so many times that I just can't picture anybody else doing it. Yeah, it was really interesting, though, those actors chosen. But so 2 Cronenbergs in a row. And again, he had a strong 80s with those 2 films, I think.
Yeah, I haven't seen The Fly in a long time. That's one I should go back and I remember liking it, but I don't remember much about it. So
yeah,
it's a classic. Should go back and watch The Fly.
I agree.
All right, so my number 4 is Nightmare on Elm Street from 1984. So teens in suburban Elm Street are stalked in their dreams by the disfigured Freddy Krueger, making sleep a deadly risk until they try to unravel his past. Directed by Wes Craven, starring Heather Langenkamp, Robert Englund, and Johnny Depp in his film debut.
Yes.
This has a 7.5 on Internet Movie Database and a 95% critic score. The franchise, I think, has not fared so well overall, but the original is very good. And I think of all those like horror icon films, this is my favorite, Nightmare on Elm Street. Yeah, maybe more than Halloween for me.
Yeah,
that's
fair
maybe
enough.
Sacrilegious for some. But
yeah, for some, yeah.
It just, I think we talked about it because we did do a review of this. Again, we did our original versus remake with the abomination of a remake from, is it 2005, 2010?
Yeah, it was bad.
It's terrible. But the original is very good.
Yep.
Just the idea that he can only get you in your sleep, but it's something that everyone inevitably has to do at some point. So the scenarios they set up where people are like trying to stay awake and taking caffeine pills. And there's one scene where Johnny Depp's supposed to like wake her up and he's, failing miserably. Johnny Depp's actually like a fun character in this one.
Yeah, he is.
The practicals are good. Robert Englund is obviously has a great performance as Freddy Krueger. The makeup, I've dressed up as Freddy Krueger twice for Halloween. And I actually really like the main theme, like the soundtrack is really good. And just that iconic sound of him like scratching those like claws on the metal pipe that like.
And I mean, there are there are still some one-liners in this one, but it doesn't become a parody like some of the later ones do.
Yeah, it gets pretty cheesy later on, but the first one, I feel like they kind of nail the tone of it.
Yeah, I agree.
So yeah, I think for sure, most people would agree Nightmare on Elm Street is the best one. Although, is it Dream Warriors, the third one?
Dream Warriors, what's the gayest horror movie ever made? It's supposed to be, but I actually really liked the final Nightmare too, because Heather Langenkamp comes back for that one.
Yeah,
that's actually, I like that one too, but still the original is my favorite for sure.
And what do you think of Nancy as a final girl relative to some of the other ones from?
Yeah, I was going to mention, because I think it's her first film as well. Johnny Depp had done a bunch of TV by this point, but this was her first film. So I think she did really well. I think she gives a pretty strong performance. And I do think she's a worthy final girl because she's got that grit, determination. She's smart. She's trying to outsmart Freddy.
She's a strong protagonist.
Yeah. So I think it was a good choice.
Maybe not a Jamie Lee Curtis, but
pretty close. I would argue. Yeah.
So yeah, my number 4, Nightmare on Elm Street.
All right. Getting into the top 5 now. My number 4 is similar to what we were talking about with Evil Dead. This is Aliens 1986,
nice.
which some people think is better than the original. I would not be one, but it's a very worthy successor. So decades after surviving, I think it's 57 years later, the Nostromo, Ellen Ripley is sent out to reestablish contact with a terraforming colony, but finds herself battling the alien queen and her offspring. So this is James Cameron, which I think I'm not sure who could have done a better job. I'm not saying he did better. I'm not sure who could have followed Ridley Scott other than a James Cameron, who's
Michael Bay.
Michael Bay, perhaps. Yeah. So Sigourney Weaver, Michael Biehn in this one, 8.4 IMDb, 94 and 94 on.
And Bill Paxton.
Bill Paxton, yes, indeed. Yeah, good story. I think it enriches the original. It goes beyond and adds some details, good performances, and intense action. I think this was a really, they amped the action on this one, which I think was really good. I don't think it's better than the original, but it's darn close. I think it's a really good
nice
sequel.
Pick. Yeah, cool. So my number 3 is also Aliens from 1986.
It's our first crossover. Yeah.
So I want to put the first. I like the first Alien better,
but it's 79.
But it's not in the 80s, so we both did the same thing and went for Aliens. Yeah. I mean, you just summed it up, so I don't have to restate what you just said. But this one much more action heavy.
Yeah.
But you see a lot more of the xenomorphs.
Yes.
And they look amazing. And I just love that version of sort of industrial sci-fi. It kind of has that Star Wars-y feel, but toned down and darker and slightly more industrial, and it really works for me. So I think, like you, I'm guessing I prefer the more survival horror aspect of the first Alien.
Yeah.
There's more suspense, less action, but more tension. So is that what you like more about the first one?
Yeah. I would say that nails it pretty well for me.
Yeah. So I think both of us would have picked Alien had it been in the 1980s, but Alien's still very good.
Yes. I certainly think those, until more recent times, like something like Prometheus, it's apples and oranges. It's a very different kind of film. But then Alien Resurrection was very much like the original films. Yeah. Right? So, good pick. I would have picked it myself.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting to have a direct overlap like that. So, is that our first overlap?
It is our first overlap.
Aliens.
And we predicted 3.
Yeah.
So my number 3 is A Nightmare on Elm Street.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, so I won't repeat what you said. I really liked, again, this is, according to Wes Craven, based on a news story that he read like in a Thai newspaper or something.
Yeah.
And again, that just, that was really inspirational for me. It really hooked me, drew me in. I didn't see this in the theaters, but I had just moved to Victoria from Toronto. And notice I took care to enunciate that because I didn't say Toronto.
Toronto.
Anyway, sorry, I got sidetracked. So I just moved to Victoria, and we had a video rental place. Now, for those of you youngins, that's where there was a whole bunch of movies stacked on the walls, and you could go in and you could pick a movie and then find out that it wasn't in because somebody didn't return it in time.
That's the worst, yeah.
Anyway, so I rented this several times, and I actually watched it with my dad the first time because he was pretty easygoing about, sure, let's put on something. Although horror wasn't his thing, he would certainly sit and watch with me. So anyway, I watched this the first time with my dad, and I was really taken. I watched it a couple of times before I returned.
Did he like it?
Yeah. I mean, he wasn't as interested in it as I am, or I was, but he liked the entertainment value of it, I think.
Kids these days will never appreciate the 5 for 5 for 5 deal. Do you remember those?
Yes.
5 movies, 5 days, $5. Classic. We used to love that. We go in and pick our 5 movies.
Oh yeah. I remember. Anyway, so yeah, there you go.
So I'm wondering if our top 4 is the same, but we'll find out.
Yeah.
All right. So that was your number 3.
Indeed.
All right. So my number 2, I'm going to guess is the same as yours, but we'll see, is The Shining from 1980. A family becomes caretakers of an isolated hotel, The Outlook, with a violent past, and as the father's mental state deteriorates, supernatural forces push him toward madness and terror. All work and no play make Jack a dull boy. Directed by Stanley Kubrick and starring the legendary Jack Nicholson, Shelley Duvall, and Danny Lloyd. This has an 8.4 on Internet Movie Database and an 84% critic score and a 93% audience score. And just reading that now, I'm shocked that it only has an 84% critic score.
That seems odd to me.
Because I feel like this is considered to be one of the best films of all time.
Yeah, certainly by some.
I would think so. So we purposefully avoided reviewing this film because this is probably the most analyzed, reviewed horror film of all time.
Yeah.
I get a lot of friends and stuff asking me, like, oh, why don't you do The Shining? It's like, there's really nothing new to say about The Shining. That being said, it is an incredible horror movie. Jack Nicholson, it's like, I would say his best performance of his whole career.
Pretty close, I think.
I mean, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest is really good. I mean, he's done a lot of good stuff. He's an amazing actor, but just
it's
the
pretty
creep
incredible.
factor for him is really good. Shelley Duvall actually is also incredible.
Yes.
Sadly, I think that came at the hands of some
abuse.
Pretty horrific abuse at the hands of Stanley Kubrick.
Yeah.
Is there a documentary on that? I think
there is.
Later in life, she came out and was pretty honest about how she was treated. It was not, but we've talked about this before, like the ethics of this issue.
Yeah.
Because I know for Ellen Burstyn and The Exorcist 2, what you end up with is a very raw, like emotional performance because there's elements of reality woven into it, which is ethically unfortunate.
Because I mean, I think he did elicit a strong performance, but does that justify terrorizing somebody for however long they shot? And he's notorious for doing like take after take after take after take. And there's somebody, I can't remember who it was, I just read recently, somebody was going to sign on to a Kubrick film, but only if he agreed to do less than 100 takes on scenes. Right. And he refused to agree to that.
Wow.
So the person says, okay, well, whatever.
Yeah. So, I mean, the cinematography, the performances, the music, the tone, like the house itself almost feels like a character.
Yeah.
There's some creepy imagery in here, and it's one of the best horror movies of all time.
Yeah.
It's not one of my favorites overall, but it's undeniably incredible. So that's my number 2, The Shining from 1980.
There you go. Well,
and your number 2.
My number 2 is also The Shining from 1980. So there's 3 overlaps, and I won't say much else except there are some cool Easter eggs in this. If you know something about Kubrick's life or whatever, there are some things there that you will see. Also, as I think I've mentioned before many times, Stephen King hated this film, but he has mellowed in the years, and he I think begrudgingly accepts the talent of the filmmaker I think he's detached it from the story that he created, and just recognizes the supremacy of the filmmaker. Actors. Before Nicholson was cast, Robin Williams. Now, maybe later
I mean,
in his career, he had the gravitas to pull that off. Maybe.
Oh, that would have been really different.
Yeah,
I think he could do it. Maybe not at that time. Like if you watch like 1 Hour Photo, or like he has done roles where he's, or even Awakenings.
Yeah.
With Robert De Niro, like he's very serious, and he can be a good serious actor.
Absolutely. But
because this requires some zaniness, I could see him.
Yeah, just like maybe taking it too far.
Yeah, maybe Nicolas Cage would have been good for this one too. Similar.
So 2 others were considered for the role: Harrison Ford.
Yeah,
which I could see because he's a pretty serious actor.
He would have been pretty good, I think, for that.
And Robert De Niro, which I cannot see at all.
I mean, he's so amazing; he could probably do anything. But I feel like they made the right choice with Jack Nicholson.
I think so too. I think, yeah, he just has something about him that lends itself to that character kind of going. I mean, this was the big controversy, right?
Yeah.
The film focuses on the psychological decline of Nicholson's character, whereas the book, it's actually about a haunted hotel. Right. So,
well, 3 years from now, when AI develops to the point where you can actually say, like, please remake The Shining with Robert De Niro as the lead, and it could actually do it, and we can see what that's like, because it'd be interesting to see the differences.
And a decent follow-up in 2019, Dr. Sleep with Ewan McGregor.
Yeah.
And I was dubious about that one, but it got the okay from Kubrick's family and from Stephen King.
Cool.
And I think it was very well done. I mean, I've read the book, but I think the movie was a good.
When I first saw they're making a sequel to The Shining, like, are you kidding me? Are you actually gonna do this? But it's good.
They pulled it off.
Yep.
There you go.
And this one, lots of references in other movies or shows, so like The Shining from The Simpsons. And it was The Evil Dead, the most recent one, Evil Dead Rise, where they do the elevator scene with the blood, which is a nice tribute to this. And even this season, was it Poltergeist? At the end, one of the hotel rooms was was it 237? Is that the hotel room? Yeah. So obviously, I mean, being a classic film gets referenced a lot, but good pick, number 2.
That's Willie's time.
I almost feel like I should let you go first for number 1, because I'm pretty sure we're going to have the same film here. You
think so?
I think so.
Okay.
But maybe not.
Should we say it at the same time?
Sure.
Okay. So our number 1 is The Thing.
For 1982. Yeah.
There you go.
We've got similar taste. I thought that might happen. I knew the bottom of our list would be very different.
Yeah.
But interesting that our top 4 is the same.
Yes.
That is actually...
I don't think we've ever done that. We've had, I think 6 maybe was our biggest crossover, but never...
Especially when the field is so wide open, and you and I have very different experiences with the 1980s. So, I mean, I guess that speaks to the quality of these films.
Indeed.
So the synopsis, we've also done an episode on this with the original versus remake, with, again, the remake being terrible. A remote Antarctic research team is confronted by a shape-shifting extraterrestrial that can assume the appearance of any living being, leading to paranoia and mistrust as they try to identify the creature. Directed by John Carpenter, starring Kurt Russell, Wilford Brimley, and Keith David, has an 8.1 at Everymovie Database and an 85% Rotten Tomatoes score. Again, that should be higher. And a 93% audience score. So we could probably just discuss this one together, but we did a whole review on this. The performances are really good.
Yeah.
That sense of isolation being... I have a board game of this film, Who Goes There?
Yeah.
And of course, this was based on the short story, novella, Who Goes There?
I think it's a novella, yeah.
Yeah, and it's so fun because everyone who's playing the game, one person ends up being the infected, but you don't know who it is.
Right.
So it really mirrors the idea of like you don't know who you can trust, and you're trying to like analyze people's behavior to see if they're on your side or not. So this captures like the paranoia of, you know, who's going to be there or not. And then the practical effects, I think, are the best of the 1980s probably. And that's saying something because there's a lot of really good practical effects.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was this was Rob Bottin did the special effects for this one. And I think he and Rick Baker were kind of like the two, top tier. I wanted to just pick up on the idea, the remake's bad. But if you would like to, I think the 1951 original is actually not bad at all.
It's good.
Thing from Another World. But I think this is one of Carpenter's best films.
It is the best, you think? Oh, you like Halloween a lot.
I like Halloween a lot, but I don't think it has the power of this one. Mm-hmm. I like it a lot. I think because that one I do think I have a nostalgia for.
Yeah.
This one is just balls to the wall, good film.
So good,
right?
Yeah.
And the other thing too I wanted to mention, this suffered from the same thing as Near Dark. It has negative reviews because it was released at the same time as E.T.
That's still crazy to me, but you're right. It apparently didn't review well at the time.
Yeah. And it's only in fairly recent times that it's, I think received its due.
Yeah.
And I mean, one of the things that you don't come across very often that I love about this film is how bleak the ending is. It just leaves you like, you don't know which one of these two might be or might not be.
Yeah.
It's freezing. Everything's on fire and they've got a bottle of whiskey between them. I think speaks to Carpenter's political views at the time.
Yeah, one of the characteristics which we mentioned at the beginning of the show was that kind of like Cold War theme. Yeah. So the idea that, there's communists or spies living amongst us, you can't tell them apart. Yeah. And so we have the same dynamic in play here.
I mean, I don't know how many times I've seen this film, but I never get sick of it.
It's so good.
Yeah, it's just so good. And there's just so many really great set pieces with the dogs and the thing with the crab legs and everything else. It's just really, really well done. It doesn't surprise me that we had 4 crossovers in the top 5.
No, I think you had said 3, I had said 4. I knew for sure The Shining, The Thing, and I was pretty sure Nightmare on Elm Street. I wasn't sure about Aliens, but I think that was our 4.
Yeah. I was surprised that you didn't have more of, a couple of the ones we reviewed this season, but I get the fact that some of them were nostalgia for you.
That's right. So the ones from this season, like I liked a lot of them, but they weren't ones I had that attachment to. And so I think these ones I was more nostalgic for, but it speaks to the depth of the 1980s though.
Absolutely. And I think if you take our top 4 films that we have in common, and we do have similar tastes, but not exact. But you can't go wrong if you haven't seen any of these films, The Thing, The Shining, Aliens, or A Nightmare on Elm Street. What are you waiting for?
Yeah.
Go watch it.
And we've always said that I tend to like the maybe more comedic horror comedies. So it makes sense that I had Gremlins and The Burbs and Monster Squad.
Yeah.
Whereas yours were all pretty straight. You didn't have any. Did you have any horror comedies on yours?
Just Evil Dead. If you want to call that.
And the first one is more serious. And I like the second one better. So
exactly.
That's interesting. Yeah. I thought you might have Shining as your number 1.
I debated. I did go back and forth, but I think part of the reason I like The Thing more is the tone of the film. I am drawn to those bleak, intense films, which I think The Thing is. Shining is more of a slow burn, which isn't a bad thing, but it's a very different kind of horror film.
Yeah.
There are some unbelievable set pieces in that one too, and some good performances all the way around. Even the child actor, what's his name? Dan? I can't remember. Anyway, it doesn't matter.
I got it here. Danny Lloyd.
I was hesitating on the Danny.
You got Danny, I know, because his character's name is Danny.
Anyway, it was a bit of a toss up, but it was no doubt in my mind kind of about what my top 2 would be, and then the top 5, a little bit more room to maneuver.
Yeah,
and one of the ones that didn't make it on my list was Hellraiser.
I considered that one.
Yeah, but. Yeah, it's good and I like it, but there were other things that these films brought that one didn't, I think.
Yeah, I agree. You'll have to come over and play Who Goes There at some point.
I would like to do that.
If you play board games at all, shout out Who Goes There. It captures the essence of The Thing very well. It's really fun.
So there's our top 10 of the 1980s. Now we're going to take a bit of a break. I think we're not going to be back until sort of mid-3rd week July. We've got to do some prep for season 8. I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, that we're doing 2025.
2025, going back to new horror movies. Yeah.
So that one, we've already seen quite a few of them, and I'm sure there'll be more coming out. So I'm really looking forward to seeing that because there's already been some really strong films in 2025.
Yeah. So if you weren't a big fan of 1980s films, we are coming back to the future.
Yeah, that's right. We're back
to do some newer films. So lots to check out.
There you go. Well, we will see you soon, and until then, we'll see you in the aisles.